Welcome to Community of Love Christian Fellowship, where God loves you and we do too. Join us in person on Sundays from 12:30 to 1:30 p.m. for 60 minutes of dynamic praise, inspiring fellowship, and life-changing worship. Point your GPS to 557 Cambridge Street in the Alston neighborhood of Boston, Massachusetts, 02134. Visit us on the web at colcf.org. That's colcf.org. To learn more about our Friday evening services, our various ministries, and our upcoming special events. Now, let's join the service already in progress.
So last week we talked about commitment. Last week we took a look at ourselves through the eyes of Mary and Martha as they reflected on busyness, as they reflected on handling so many things in life, as they reflected on what really is the priority in life, what really is God calling upon us to do. And what we discussed was the notion that God was looking for our commitment, and that God was looking for us to focus on the thing that was most important. And so now as we continue today to ponder this notion of commitment, I'd like to invite you to work with me for just a few moments on the notion of full commitment. Full commitment, avoiding doing all of the right things wrong. Full commitment, avoiding doing all of the right things wrong. One of our favorite books of the Bible is the book of Proverbs. And in chapter 3, I have been particularly moved by a few verses here, and I'd like to share them with you. Proverbs is known as wisdom literature. And what I love about this notion of it being known as wisdom literature is that it came to be in the multicultural setting of Israel. And it came to be through the son of David, King Solomon, who is thought to be the author of many, many, many proverbs, along with a cohort of other bright people who developed a reputation for just having common sense. And so to begin in Proverbs 3, verse 1, and reading through verse 12. Please join me in silent reading. My son, do not forget my teaching, but keep my commands in your heart, for they will prolong your life many years and bring you prosperity. Let love and faithfulness never leave you. Bind them around your work. Write them on the tablet of your heart. Then you will win favor and a good name in the sight of God and man. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. He will direct your paths. He will make your paths straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, and do not resent his rebuke, because the Lord disciplines those he loves, as a father the son he delights in. Lord, bless the reading and the hearing and the understanding of your holy word. For purposes of today, I'd like to focus our attention in verses 5 through 8, which I will reread. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. What is this thing about commitment? What is this thing about understanding the Lord, trusting the Lord? What is this all about? I don't know about you, but sometimes have you ever met those people who seem always to be on top of everything, who seem always to be on time for everything, who seem always to have it all together, usually beautifully dressed, perfectly coiffed, and always with the appearance of being ready to go. But the moment they open their mouth, they misspeak. The moment they look like they're going to do something kind, they offend. The moment they look like they're going to share, they actually take away. Have you ever met somebody who was so focused on doing the right thing that they followed in a tradition that they did not understand, could not explain? And furthermore, were always exasperated by. Have you ever met anyone like that? Have you ever been to a church where they've had a 35-year tradition of having the usher board meet at a particular place, which costs everybody money and requires a new outfit for everyone to be there and to celebrate this time? Have you ever been to a place where the organizational structure was so challenged because everybody wanted to look right, everybody wanted to seem upright, everybody wanted to pray the best prayer, everybody wanted to have the highest title, everybody was focused on doing all the right things for the wrong reasons? Have you ever seen a parent who grew up feeling challenged, who felt like their child should never feel that way, who gave and gave and gave and protected and covered until that child didn't understand right from wrong? Have you ever heard of a child like that? Did you hear about the child whose defense recently was that he had affluenza because he had been so loved and so cared for and so coddled that he had no understanding of the distinction between right and wrong? Lived in a beautiful house, two-parent household. I gotta imagine there was a TV in every room, leather furniture, beautiful tapestries, perfect school. But he has affluenza. Have you ever been somewhere where you made the obligatory appearance, where you fussed and, dare I say, cussed for the entire time it took you to get ready to go to an event that you didn't want to go to see folks you didn't like, for the purpose of making sure that everybody thought you were all right? Do you know what I'm talking about? Have you ever met that person who is always ready to give you a gift, and you get the gift and you say to yourselves, this person doesn't know me. Oh my God, why did they do this? But yet there's a basket full of gifts for everybody, and everybody's stressed when the person comes in. Have you ever seen that before? Have you ever known of somebody who took somebody for dinner for more than a meal? Have you ever known somebody who was so beautiful and so lovely, yet there was nothing behind it? Have you ever seen somebody who loved based on expectations that love would come back? Have you ever seen somebody love because they thought that that was who they were supposed to love, not who they began to love, who they thought they needed to love because it would provide for them what they thought they should have for life? Have you ever seen somebody love somebody because doing so would protect them from the things that they went through in their lives? Have you ever seen someone running around just doing with no particular focus? You see, the business world has a very, very interesting perspective on this concept. And they say too many projects get off the ground. They get going on the wrong foot. Because the tendency of too many of us is to focus on making sure that we do the right thing, but not thinking about how to make sure the process moves forward correctly. We're so focused on doing the right thing that we get going on a process that is wrong. We find ourselves in a place where we wonder, should we be doing this at all? Why are we doing this? Do we have to do this? How do we do this? What alternatives have we considered to this choice? And quite frankly, what's interesting is that we find ourselves with these questions not being asked enough. Because so often we're afraid and we don't allow the time that it takes to think in the business world, but also to pray for those of us who are called by God. To think and to pray. And then we find ourselves involved in a project, in a task, in a situation where it was too late to ask those questions. And then we find ourselves saying, I've started it, therefore I must finish. You see, this requires us to change our minds. We have to take a look at our mindsets and wonder, what would God have me to do in this circumstance? What's very interesting about it is that in so many ways we find ourselves in our own lives doing things that are all the right things for the wrong reasons, making ourselves sick, giving ourselves ulcers, forcing ourselves into round holes when we're a square peg. But we have to change our mindset. We find ourselves defining insanity. We keep doing the same things, the same wrong things, trying to do right, but finding ourselves with a headache, with a big bill, with a relationship that doesn't make sense, around a whole bunch of people we don't like, in an environment that makes us sick, doing a job that is not what we've been called to do. So this requires us to change. When we have an alarm bell ringing in our head, and we know that what we're doing is the wrong stuff, instead of trying to keep going and fix it, to make it better, to improve it, to move it along, to speed it up, to get to Friday, we need to stop. Stop. Let's go back. Let's recommit. Let's commit fully. Let's look at trusting. Let's look at leaning on God. Let's look at leaning away from what society says we should do. There was a time when any young man who could string together 3 to 5 sentences and sound remotely like he was intelligent would be told, you're going to be a preacher when you grow up. There was a time when any young woman who could string together 3 to 5 sentences and look remotely caring was told, you should be a teacher. Oh, and then if she had some knowledge of science, she was told, you should be a nurse. But we're not called to be what everybody else has called us to be, for God has called upon us to trust. Trust in me. Trust in me. Trust in God with all of your heart. So many of us entrust our hearts just anywhere. But what we're being called on today is to trust in the Lord. Some of us are thinking about Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day is Friday. You see hearts around, things are getting pink, it's cute. I'm looking for my little heart ring that I like to wear. It's fun. But do we trust? Do we trust in that person that we're getting ready to celebrate? Do we really trust? Or are some of us getting ready to go buy jewelry and chocolate and all kinds of things that we don't want? Because somebody else said we should do it, not because we're trusting in God and that we're leaning to God to direct us. For God said, love me to me with loving appreciation. Bring that trust. Bring that love. Come back. I was reflecting on that song, Old Time Religion. And the funny thing about old time religion is people think, old time religion? Why do I want that? I don't want to go backwards. I don't want I don't want to be back there in the woods and the forest like grandma and them. But one of the things about that old time religion is that it was quite simple. Trust in the Lord. Sister Rosa told us when she went over to Ecuador that folk were poor. They didn't have a thing. There was no mall, there was no iPhone, there was no glam and glitz. But they trusted in the Lord. What did you say? They were happy. They were so happy. They were happy beyond even her ability to understand. So we're being called upon to trust God, to acknowledge God, to worship God in all that we do. See, I love my sister Laura when she starts playing. Sometimes she starts making those I am worshiping the Lord faces. And she doesn't like for folk to watch her when she's doing that. But we thank God that she's trusting, that she's playing as God has called her, that she is worshiping God through her mind, through her fingers, through the music, through the spirit, and encouraging as a musical director all of those who are playing around her and singing around her, and all of us to trust in the Lord. For there are no words for that kind of worship. There are no words for how we can be with God in the midst of reading to a child. We can be with God in blessing someone with our hands. We can be with God and worship God in saving someone from their own selves. We can trust in God, acknowledge God, and love God in all that we do. You see, when you talk about stripping away, we're talking about not being wise in our own eyes. Some of us are so proud of ourselves. We are proud. I'm going to tell you, I was chief among the proud people when I finished my education formally the first time. You couldn't tell me anything. We were so happy. Luke did something he hasn't done since. He picked me up and spun me around. He was so happy. We were happy. We said, yes, we did something. This is done. We are proud. Peacocks. We're walking around like, yeah, we got it done. We live in the right neighborhood. We got the right number of children. We're in the right school. We're going in the right direction. We drive the right car. We're married to the right person. We got this. And then sometimes it feels like the walls come tumbling around us. For what we have done is that we have leaned not to God, but to our own understanding. We're not acknowledging Him, we're acknowledging our education. We're acknowledging that we've gotten a fabulous job. We're acknowledging So even the people who love us the most can become those that we seek out before God. But he's saying to us, me, look here, commit to me, be with me, depend upon me. I will make your path straight. I will show you the way. I will never leave you nor forsake you. I have sent my son into the world not to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be free. I got your back in a way that no one else can. I love you. I created you. I am he that can still the waters. I am the way. I am the truth. I am the light. I, and only I, can make your path straight. I, and only I, can get you out of that mess. I, and only I, can tell you the right way to go. I, and only I, can help you to go back to that point where somebody hurt your feelings and caused you to feel like you need to come back and do the right thing in the wrong way every single time. I am the one who can do that for you. And then, the peace of love. I love this. You follow me, you do what I've called you to do, and then you're going to experience health. You're going to experience health in your body. You're going to experience health in your spirit. You're going to experience health in your mind. You can be restored because I am the way. I am the truth. I am the light. I want to just share a story with you as I prepare to take my seat. There was a man who did not like his father. He disliked his father so much. He wanted to fight with his father, but he never, ever spoke the truth to his father. He never, ever told his father how he really felt. So he grew up with this anger inside of him. He grew up with bad feelings inside of him. But he worked hard and he pushed himself. And by all accounts, he was a successful member of the armed forces. He was a pilot, and you got to imagine, he got up and he put on whichever uniform he needed to put on, and he stood proud. By all who looked at him, he was a success. He had done all of the right things. But he came and found himself in the war. And it doesn't matter what the war was. What matters was that he had taken it upon himself to fight. He wanted to fight for causes. He wanted to fight for justice. He wanted to fight to cause people to do the right thing. He wanted to fight. So one day, while at war, he was in the course of a tour, and he was flying. He was joined by 3 other men, and they were shot down. As that plane burned, he managed to pull himself out of that plane, and he survived. He watched his comrades perish. He lived for many, many years to follow. But the pain of that incident was not the pain of losing his comrades. It was not the pain of being the sole survivor. It was the pain of having chosen to fight and to kill as a vocation, as an avocation, instead of dealing with what made him want to fight to begin with, instead of being straight, instead of going back to the basics, instead of honoring God and his relationship and knowing that God is calling upon us to honor our fathers and our mothers, that our days on this earth might be blessed, instead of going basis, having failed to trust in the Lord, having determined on his own, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to fight these causes. I'm going to fight all my life because I got to fight. But he didn't trust in the Lord. He leaned only to his understanding. Yeah, he was successful, but he was not happy. He was not comfortable. He was not fulfilled. He hadn't done what God had called him to do. And so today, let us remember to focus on God. Let us remember to focus on God, the author and perfecter of our faith. Let us remember to avoid focusing on our conceited, imperfect understanding, but in all our ways to acknowledge God and know that God will heal us. That we lean not to our own experience, not to our mother, not to our father, not to our sister, not to our brother, but we lean on God. For through him, we will find true healing. Through him, we will find life beyond our understanding. Through him, we can be made anew. Through God, all things are possible. Through God, healing is possible. So let us return to that old time religion. Let us return to the fact that the greatest command, simple, old, but great, is that we love the Lord our God with all our hearts, with all our minds, with all our souls and our bodies. And the next is likewise, that we love our neighbors as ourselves. So as we look to recommit, as we look to make the full commitment, as we look to avoid doing all wrong things, all the right things in the wrong way, let us remember to trust in the Lord, to lean not to our own understanding, and in all our ways to acknowledge him. And I promise you,